Alright, I mentioned we would see Nmap again, and indeed we shall. Nmap has something called the Nmap scripting engine, which has some vulnerability scanning capabilities as well. I often use it for manual checks to verify what I get out of the vulnerability scanner, and to look for additional things like recently the Poodle vulnerability came out, and actually there was a Nmap check that came out for it. I think before the Nessus one did even. Don't quote me on that, I could be wrong. Maybe I just wasn't updated, but I updated the Nmap and then I could check for the Poodle almost immediately with the Nmap scripting engine. So it's always good to have at least two things you're working with. Two tools is certainly better than one. So Nmap scripting engine is one I always end up using on my tests as well. So on Kali, we can find Nmap scripting engine at user share Nmap scripts. And these are all our scripts. So this is going to be written in Lua. So that's another programming language to learn. But you are, of course, able to write your own Nmap scripting engine scripts. And so we can, of course, look at the code for any of these if we wanted to, but we also have an option to do --script-help and then ask it for information about a particular script or even a script category. So like there's a category called default, so it'll show us all of the scripts that are in the default category, which some of the most interesting ones are not in the default category. The one thing you have to be careful with Nmap scripting engine is that some of them are actually dangerous and can cause denial of service. And so, like for instance, if we do an Nmap --script-help and say we want smb-check-vulns. This one is in the intrusive and denial of service categories. It says, warning, these checks are dangerous and very likely to bring down a server. They should not be run in a production environment unless you, and more importantly, the business, understand the risks. So there are going to be Nmap scripting engine scripts. The same way there were with Nessus, we saw things that were turned off automatically that could be intrusive. There are going to be things in Nmap scripting engine that could potentially cause problems, of course, as we saw with port scanning. Even something as simple as saying, hi port, what are you, could cause a problem. We saw that Zervit 0.4 on 3232 actually went down during a version scan. So it's always possible, but some of these, they say, this could cause a problem. We may not want to run that. So maybe using this to find our MSO8067 is not the best idea ever. But we'll see. We have other options for that. And we already saw it come out in Nessus anyways. But we could do, like, say, how about Nmap --script-help. And say, like, nfs-ls. We said we saw the network file system on our Linux system. So that might be something interesting. Discovery and safe. So it's not run by default, but it is safe, so there's no reason we shouldn't run it. But if we run just the default set of scripts, then we won't get anything out of it, because it won't run that one. So we'll have to run this one manually if we want to do any network file system checking. Which we certainly want to know what's in that network file system share. Of course, we could look up how to do it ourselves, so why not just use the script? So we can, of course, use the default set. So -sc or -s or -a will give us the scripts. So let's do our two hosts here. And we should always take our notes. And I'll just call this script output. And this will, of course, take a minute to run. Another thing you can do, I've been kind of outputting everything here. Of course, you can just copy paste. I mean, as long as you're keeping track of what's coming out. in one way or another. There we go. It's just going to give us some additional information. So it looks like FTP anonymous login allowed. So that could be really awesome. It could also be really nothing. But let's see, it actually went ahead and logged in as anonymous and asked what we could see. And it looks like there's something called passwords.txt. So this might be something useful. It comes up, I think, as a medium in Nessus. Yeah. I mean, it could have no potential exploitability. I mean, as long as nothing's in there that is sensitive that you don't want people to see, and otherwise it's configured correctly, you can't break out of the directory, then everything's fine. If I didn't have, say, Dropbox or something, I mean, anonymous FTP might be a way I want to distribute files for my classes. There's nothing wrong with that. So it may have no business impact whatsoever. I mean, the real thing about FTP is that it authenticates in plain text. But if we're using anonymous, it doesn't matter because it's not real credentials anyway. But in some cases like this, and you might say, that would never happen. Well, actually, I do know of times it has happened that clients have had anonymous FTP available to the internet, and that they've had corporate secrets actually in there. So it is something that could possibly happen. I'm looking at the SMTP, so port 25. So it has the verify verb. The verify verb will allow us to check to see whether a certain username exists. That would help us find valid usernames for password guessing. So that might be something we want to check out. Looks like for HTTP, it says it's XAMPP 1.7.2. If you're not familiar with XAMPP, it's an easy way to get a web server and database and PHP and all that running. And it doesn't necessarily come installed with all of the best security features enabled, as we'll see. And, most people, they want to get on with it. They want to install XAMPP and get on with building whatever it is they're building on top of it, probably doing some development. So they may just leave it in its default state. This is fairly common. Looks like we've got some SSL version 2 and some ciphers here, maybe some weak cipher suites. That would be something we would report on, but unlikely we would be able to get access to any system through it. Anybody who does will be quite famous in hacking circles because it comes up all the time. See that MySQL again, though we saw that MySQL was unauthorized when we did our version scanning, so we won't be able to get into that directly. There may be another way. It says it's Windows XP, and indeed it is. We also have anonymous FTP allowed on our Linux system. Doesn't look like there's anything in there. SSH. It says it has the trace method on HTTP. See, it didn't automatically run anything for network file system here as expected because it wasn't in the default set. We only ran the default set here. So let's run. So let's do --script equals and do nfs-ls against our Linux system. And we can do that -p for port and do possibly, so it might be one, it's actually going to talk to more than one port, so I'll just leave it. See, here's network file system down here at 2049, but it actually talks to 111, the RPC bind port. Could get it. That's how, FTP is actually 20 and 21 kind of things. So it looks like we've got something called export Georgia, like we saw, and see what's in there. It says it only lists 10 files, so there may be more, but it looks like we have read, modify, delete, no execute. We can read files and even modify them, so we can make changes to files in there. What's going to be particularly interesting to us is this .ssh. This ID underscore RSA shouldn't be there. That's obviously, I used it in another class and somebody screwed up where they were supposed to be putting things, because that is going to come up, but that's not where it goes. What's actually going to be interesting to us is this .ssh folder. So it looks like someone named Georgia shared her home folder, not thinking about some of those hidden directories that start with the dot. That if we do an ls-a for all, as we saw in the Linux section, we can see. So what might be stored in a .ssh directory? We know that SSH is running. We saw port 22. Well, that's actually where we're going to store our keys. So our public and private keys for Georgia are going to be there. So if we can get access to those, we might be able to bypass authentication for SSH and get access to that system. So that might be pretty cool. So that definitely seems like something we should take a look at as we go on. So there's certainly more scripts to look at. I only showed you the default and then an example. So again, if you go to user share nmap scripts, you can see all of them here. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look at more of them. Spend some time with that before moving on to the next video.